The purpose of this video is for you to learn how to find the volume of the pyramid. The formula that we're going to use to find the volume of a pyramid says to take and multiply 1/3 times the product of the area of the base, which is represented again by capital B, times the height of the figure. So this is what your formula is going to look like on your formula sheet with respect to volume of a pyramid. You need to know that capital B represents the area of that base. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we might use this problem in order to, or this formula in order to solve some problems. In example 1, they're asking us, it's a very straightforward question, they're asking us to come right out and find the volume of the regular pyramid shown. Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So since I'm trying to find the volume, I know the formula that I need to use is to multiply 1/3 times the area of the base times the height. And every time I write down that capital B, I think to myself, area of the base. Okay, so volume equals 1/3. The very first thing I need to do is go find the area of my base. So the base of this pyramid, because it's a regular pyramid, the base is going to be in the shape of a square. Its sides measure 7 by 7. Its area, therefore, is going to be 49 square centimeters. So that part was relatively straightforward and simple, but now I need to multiply that times the height of my pyramid. Remember that the height of the pyramid, or the altitude, is the distance between the vertex and this very center point here in the base. So although they gave us the slant height in this pyramid of 11.5, they haven't given us the height. And that's unfortunate, because what we really need in order to solve this problem is we need the length of that red line segment. That's the height of our pyramid. But they do tell us that the length of a base edge is equal to 7 centimeters. And if I go ahead and connect there, I've made myself a nice little right triangle, which I'm going to go ahead and isolate so that I can look at that and examine this in a little bit greater detail. This represents the height of my pyramid. And I'm going to color code a little bit. The blue segment here will correspond to the blue segment in this triangle. And then this piece here represents my purple piece up here. So pieces that I know that purple segment, which represents the hypotenuse of my triangle, is 11.5. And I don't know the length of that blue line segment, but I can find it. I know the length of a whole base edge here is going to be 7 centimeters. This distance is going to have to be half of that, since it goes from the center of the pyramid to that outside edge. So the length of this blue piece here is going to be 3.5. And now if I want to go ahead and find my height, I've got a right triangle where I know 2 out of the 3 pieces, so I can use Pythagorean Theorem. Just be careful as you're using Pythagorean Theorem and make sure that you substitute legs for legs and the hypotenuse for the hypotenuse. So my 2 legs in this case are h and 3.5. So h squared plus 3.5 squared equals the square of my hypotenuse, 11.5 squared. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 3.5 squared from both sides. So into my calculator, I'm going to type 11.5 squared, subtract 3.5 squared, and my calculator tells me 120. So since the square of h is 120, h is going to have to be plus or minus the square root of 120. Now, if it makes you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and simplify that. I'm not going to, just because I'm looking ahead at the directions that were given to me for this problem. And in the directions, they're very clear and very specific in that they want us to round this answer to the nearest hundredth. And since I'm going to be rounding anyway, it doesn't make a difference whether I simplify that radical or not. So if you want to, and it makes you feel comfortable to, by all means go ahead and feel free to simplify that radical. But I'm just going to replace the height in my formula with that square root of 120. And now, since I want to round to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my calculator and I'm going to type in 1/3 times 49 times the square root of 120. And when I type all that into my calculator tells me 178.9227 and a whole bunch of other decimals after that. Since I'm trying to round to the nearest hundredth, my volume is going to end up being 178.92 either centimeters cubed or cubic centimeters. All right, so there's the first one. If you have questions about that, why don't you jot them in the margin so that you can remember to ask me the next time that you come back to class. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to our second example. This one doesn't come with a diagram, but it says find the volume of a square pyramid whose base length is 75 inches and whose altitude is 100 inches. Since they don't give us a picture, the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a picture. And I'm going to draw a square that's a little bit off center, so it ends up looking a little bit more like a rhombus than it does a square. But because we're dealing with, or they tell us it's a square pyramid, I'm going to keep in the back of my mind that this is indeed a square. I'm going to let this point up here be my vertex. And now I can go ahead and connect that vertex to each of the vertices in that square that makes up my base. And even though I'm not a very sophisticated or fancy artist, I've got a diagram that I can use that'll be helpful and useful to me in solving this problem. So this base length is 75 inches. So my base length is going to be right here in the picture. And if I want, because this is a square, I can go label all these pieces with 75. The altitude, or the height, in this case is 100 inches. So the height goes from the vertex all the way down to the center of the pyramid, and that distance is 100. The formula that I'm going to use for finding the volume of a prism, volume equals 1/3 times the area of the base times my height. So now I'm going to go substitute what I need into that formula. My base is in the shape of a square. Its area is represented by length times width, or base times height, or side squared, however you prefer to think about that. Those are three different ways that are all correct representations of the same idea. So when I punch 75 squared into my calculator tells me that the area of that square base is 5,625 square inches. So now I can come up here. I want to multiply 1/3 times 5,625 times the height of my pyramid. And what's nice about this example is they've already given us the height. We don't need to use Pythagorean Theorem. And notice that this question is different than the first question, in that in the first problem they gave us the slant height of the pyramid, and in this problem they're giving us the height. So you're going to have to really look very closely and discern and differentiate and make sure you understand the difference between all those different parts or those different pieces. So now I'm going to go ahead and get out my calculator and multiply 1/3 times 5,625 times 100. And when I do that, I find that the volume of this pyramid is 187,500 in either cubic inches or inches cubed. All right, so that's all I have for you on volume of the pyramid. As always, I want you to summarize in your own words the key ideas and important understandings of the video that you just watched, and then see if you can apply what you just learned in order to solve the problems on the next page.